In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of corn, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The streets were lined with modest houses painted in shades of white and pastel blue, their porches adorned with flower pots that swayed gently in the breeze. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and Sundays were spent either at church or sharing meals with neighbors. At the heart of this community stood Maplewood Elementary School, a red brick building surrounded by tall oak trees. For decades, it had been the pride of the town, known for its strong academic programs and dedicated teachers. Among the students who attended Maplewood was a young boy named Marcus Thompson. He was 10 years old with dark brown skin that glowed under the sun and curly hair that always seemed to have a mind of its own. Marcus wasn't like most of the other kids in his class. While many of them spent recess running around the playground or climbing monkey bars, he preferred quieter activities. On sunny afternoons, you could often find him sitting beneath the big oak tree near the school fence, humming softly to himself. Sometimes he'd sketch pictures in his notebook, drawings of guitars, trumpets, pianos, and drums. Music fascinated Marcus in a way nothing else did. It made him feel alive, as though every note carried a piece of magic just waiting to be discovered. Marcus came from a close-knit family. His mother worked long hours as a nurse at the local hospital, while his father fixed cars at a garage on the outskirts of town. Though they didn't have much money, they always found ways to make ends meet. They encouraged Marcus to dream big, telling him stories about how hard work and perseverance could take him anywhere he wanted to go. "You can do anything you set your mind to," his dad would say, ruffling his hair affectionately. Those words stayed with Marcus, fueling his curiosity and determination. One crisp autumn morning, an announcement over the intercom caught the attention of every student in the school. Mr. Peterson, the music teacher, stood at the front of the assembly hall, holding up a shiny trumpet. Behind him were several large boxes stacked neatly, each labeled with the names of different musical instruments. "Starting today," he announced with a grin, "we're introducing a new program called Discover Your Sound. Every student will get the chance to try out various instruments and explore their musical talents." The room erupted into excited chatter. Some kids cheered loudly, imagining themselves as rock stars or members of a marching band. Others groaned, clearly uninterested. But Marcus sat quietly, his eyes wide with wonder. This was his moment, the opportunity he'd been waiting for without even realizing it. When the day finally arrived for students to choose their instruments, anticipation filled the air. Classrooms buzzed with energy as children eagerly waited, their turn to peek inside the mysterious boxes. When Marcus entered the music room, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The walls were covered with posters of famous musicians, and the smell of polished wood lingered faintly in the air. As Mr. Peterson opened the first box, revealing gleaming saxophones and clarinets, Marcus scanned the room, trying to decide which instrument would suit him best. Maybe the trumpet, or perhaps the guitar. But then something unexpected happened. Near the back of the room, two teachers, Mrs. Harper and Mr. Collins, began whispering to each other. Their voices were low, but Marcus, whose ears were unusually sharp, managed to catch bits of their conversation. "Let's see how long he lasts," Mrs. Harper said with a sly smile, nodding toward Marcus. Before Marcus could process what she meant, Mr. Peterson handed him a violin. It was smaller than he expected, its smooth wooden surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Confusion washed over Marcus as he stared at the delicate instrument in his hands. A violin? Why had they given him this instead of something more exciting like a drum set or a keyboard? For a moment, Marcus hesitated, unsure whether to ask questions or simply accept the situation. But before he could say anything, Mrs. Harper chimed in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, I'm sure Marcus will love the violin," she said, exchanging amused glances with Mr. Collins. The comment sent a ripple of laughter through the room, though Marcus couldn't tell if it was directed at him or not. Feeling a strange mixture of embarrassment and defiance, Marcus clutched the violin tightly and left the music room, vowing silently that he wouldn't let anyone see him give up. That evening, as Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, Staring at the violin case, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to march back to school the next day and demand a different instrument. Another part, however, refused to let the teasing get the better of him. Deep down, Marcus had always believed in proving people wrong, not out of spite, but because he loved challenges. And so, despite the awkwardness of the situation, he decided to give the violin a chance. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would change not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. As days turned into weeks, Marcus began practicing diligently. At first, the violin seemed impossibly difficult to master. The strings bit into his fingertips, leaving sore marks that stung when he pressed too hard. Producing a single clear note felt like an insurmountable task, and the sounds coming from the instrument were far from pleasant. Neighbors passing by his house sometimes winced at the screeching noises emanating from his window. Yet Marcus refused to give up. Each failed attempt only fueled his resolve to improve. Slowly but surely, he started noticing small victories. A note held just a fraction longer, a melody that sounded slightly less chaotic. These tiny triumphs kept him motivated, reminding him that progress, no matter how slow, was still progress. Meanwhile, rumors about the prank spread throughout the school. Kids whispered behind Marcus's back, calling him nicknames like Fiddle Boy and mocking his struggles. Even some of the teachers continued to treat the whole situation as a joke, laughing privately whenever they saw him carrying the violin. Despite the ridicule, Marcus remained focused. He told himself that their opinions didn't matter, that what truly mattered was how he felt about his own efforts. With each passing day, he grew more determined to show everyone that they had underestimated him. At home, Marcus's parents noticed the toll the teasing was taking on their son. His mother hugged him tightly one evening, brushing away tears that had slipped down his cheeks. "You don't have to keep doing this if it's making you unhappy," she said gently. But Marcus shook his head firmly. "I want to keep going," he replied, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I think I can do it." His parents exchanged worried glances but ultimately supported his decision, knowing that quitting wasn't in Marcus's nature. What Marcus didn't realize at the time was that his journey with the violin was about more than just learning an instrument. It was about resilience, self-discovery, and finding strength in the face of adversity. And though the road ahead would be challenging, Marcus was ready to embrace whatever came his way, with courage, determination, and an unwavering belief in himself. The weeks following Marcus's introduction to the violin were filled with frustration, determination, and quiet moments of triumph. Each day after school, he would retreat to his tiny bedroom, close the door, and sit cross-legged on the floor, with the violin resting awkwardly in his lap. The first few days were particularly grueling. His fingers felt clumsy as they fumbled over the strings, pressing down too hard or not hard enough. The bow screeched against the strings like nails dragging across a chalkboard, producing sounds so jarring that even Marcus cringed. Yet despite the chaos, he refused to give up. At first, practicing felt less like music making and more like solving an impossible puzzle. Marcus spent hours trying to figure out how to hold the violin correctly, how to position his fingers, and how much pressure to apply with the bow. He watched countless YouTube videos late into the night, mimicking the movements of professional violinists. Their graceful gestures seemed effortless, but when Marcus tried to replicate them, the results were anything but smooth. Still, he persisted, driven by a stubborn streak that had always been part of his personality. "If I can learn this," he thought to himself one evening, "then no one will ever laugh at me again." His parents noticed the toll it was taking on him. One night, as Marcus practiced, his mother peeked into his room. She saw her son hunched over the instrument, sweat beading on his forehead, his lips pressed tightly together in concentration. Her heart ached for him. "Marcus," she said softly, stepping inside, "are you sure about this? You don't have to keep doing something that makes you unhappy." Marcus looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. For a moment he considered telling her everything, the teasing at school, the whispers among teachers, the weight of proving himself. But instead he simply shook his head. "I'm okay, Mom," he replied. "I just need more time." Time, however, wasn't on Marcus's side. Word spread quickly around Maplewood Elementary about the prank played on him. Some kids snickered openly whenever they saw him carrying the violin case. Others whispered behind his back, calling him names like Squeaky Strings and Fiddle Boy. Even during lunch breaks, Marcus became the target of cruel jokes. "Hey, Marcus," one boy shouted across the cafeteria one afternoon. "When are you going to play us a song, or is it still stuck in screech mode?" Laughter erupted around the table, leaving Marcus red-faced and humiliated. But Marcus didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he turned his focus inward, channeling all his energy into mastering the violin. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, progress began to show. After weeks of relentless practice, Marcus finally managed to produce a single clear note, a pure, resonant sound that lingered in the air for several seconds. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to him. That night, he ran to his parents' room, bursting with excitement. "Listen," he exclaimed, grabbing the violin and playing the same note again. His father's face lit up with pride. "That's amazing, son," he said, pulling Marcus into a tight hug. For the first time in what felt like forever, Marcus allowed himself to smile. Encouraged by this breakthrough, Marcus threw himself even deeper into his practice routine. He started waking up earlier each morning, using the quiet hours before school to refine his technique. On weekends, he visited the local library to borrow books about famous violinists and composers. He read stories about people who had overcome incredible odds to become masters of their craft, drawing inspiration from their journeys. One name stood out to him: Itzhak Perlman, a renowned violinist who had battled polio as a child yet continued to pursue his passion for music. Reading about Perlman's perseverance gave Marcus renewed hope. If someone could succeed despite such challenges, then surely he could too. Back at school, the atmosphere remained tense. Teachers who had initially dismissed Marcus as a joke now watched him with growing curiosity. Mrs. Harper, in particular, found herself conflicted. She had never intended for the prank to go this far. She'd assumed Marcus would abandon the violin after a week or two, giving everyone a good laugh in the process. But seeing him pour his heart into it made her feel uneasy. One afternoon, as she passed by the music room, she paused outside the door. Inside, Marcus sat alone, bowing steadily across the strings. The melody was simple, just a few notes strung together, but it carried a sense of determination that couldn't be ignored. Mrs. Harper sighed guiltily and walked away, wondering if she had misjudged the boy entirely. Meanwhile, Marcus's classmates began to take notice of his improvement. At first, they teased him mercilessly, but as his skills grew, some of them started to feel a twinge of admiration. During recess, a group of boys gathered near the swings, whispering amongst themselves. "Did you hear Marcus play yesterday?" one of them asked. "It actually sounded kinda good." Another boy shrugged. "Yeah, but he's still weird." For sticking with it. Despite their mixed reactions, Marcus remained unfazed. He knew better than to let others dictate his self-worth. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus's confidence soared. What had once been a source of ridicule was slowly transforming into something beautiful. He began experimenting with different pieces of music, starting with nursery rhymes and gradually moving on to more complex compositions. One evening, while flipping through a beginner's sheet music book, he stumbled upon a piece titled "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Though simple, the melody held a special place in his heart. It was one of the first songs his mother had sung to him as a baby. Determined to master it, Marcus practiced tirelessly, replaying the tune over and over until his fingers moved instinctively across the strings. By spring, Marcus's transformation was undeniable. Gone were the days of screeching notes and awkward bowing. In their place stood a young musician whose dedication had paid off in ways no one, not even Marcus himself, had anticipated. When Mr. Peterson announced that the annual talent show was approaching, Marcus hesitated. Entering meant putting himself in the spotlight, exposing himself to potential embarrassment if things went wrong. But deep down, He knew it was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. This was his chance to prove not only to others but also to himself that he was capable of greatness. With trembling hands, Marcus submitted his name for the talent show. The news spread quickly throughout the school, sparking a mix of reactions. Some students rolled their eyes, convinced that Marcus's performance would end in disaster. Others secretly hoped he might surprise them. Teachers, too, had varying opinions. Mrs. Harper, still burdened by guilt, approached Marcus one afternoon after class. "Are you sure about this?" she asked cautiously. Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Yes," he replied firmly. "I've worked really hard, and I want to share what I've learned." Mrs. Harper forced a smile, though her stomach churned with anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was partially responsible for whatever happened next. In the weeks leading up to the talent show, Marcus practiced harder than ever before. He stayed late after school, borrowing additional sheet music from Mr. Peterson, who grew increasingly impressed by the boy's dedication. "You're improving faster than anyone I've ever taught," the teacher remarked one afternoon, watching as Marcus flawlessly executed a challenging passage. Marcus grinned shyly, grateful for the encouragement. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had a shot at succeeding. On the morning of the talent show, nerves overwhelmed Marcus. As he stood backstage, clutching his violin, he could hear the muffled chatter of the audience beyond the curtain. Parents, teachers, and students filled the auditorium, eagerly awaiting the performances. Marcus closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to steady his racing heart. He reminded himself of all the hours he had spent practicing, all the obstacles he had overcome. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let fear stand in his way. When his name was called, Marcus stepped onto the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight. The auditorium fell silent as he raised the violin to his chin and drew the bow across the strings. The opening notes of Vivaldi's Spring rang out, hesitant at first but soon gaining strength and clarity. Marcus poured every ounce of emotion into the performance, letting the music carry him away. By the time he reached the final crescendo, the audience was spellbound. When the last note faded into silence, there was a brief pause before thunderous applause erupted, filling the room with waves of cheers and whistles. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he lowered the violin, overwhelmed by the response. He hadn't expected such an outpouring of support. As he bowed deeply, he realized that this moment wasn't just about proving himself. It was about showing everyone that resilience and hard work could turn even the most unlikely beginnings into something extraordinary. And in that instant, Marcus understood that he had not only conquered the violin, but also silenced the doubters who had once underestimated him. The morning of the talent show dawned bright and clear, casting golden sunlight through Marcus's bedroom window. He woke up earlier than usual, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. Today was the day he would step onto the stage in front of the entire school, and possibly prove to everyone that their doubts about him were misplaced. As he got ready, his hands trembled slightly while tying his shoelaces. "You'll do great," his mother reassured him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Her words were meant to calm him, but they only reminded Marcus of how much was at stake. When he arrived at school, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Posters advertising the talent show lined the hallways, and students whispered excitedly about who might win. Some kids rehearsed last-minute routines in empty classrooms, while others huddled together, debating which acts would stand out. For Marcus, however, the attention felt heavier than ever. Every glance in his direction made him wonder, were people curious about his performance, or were they waiting for him to fail? He tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the music he had practiced for months. Backstage preparations began shortly after lunch. The auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paint, its rows of seats slowly filling with parents, teachers, and classmates. Marcus stood near the wings of the stage, clutching his violin case tightly. Around him, other participants bustled about, adjusting costumes, tuning instruments, and reciting lines under their breath. A girl dressed as a magician juggled colorful scarves nervously, while two boys wearing matching dance outfits stretched their legs nearby. Despite the chaos, Marcus couldn't help feeling isolated. No one seemed to notice him, or if they did, they avoided making eye contact. As the clock ticked closer to showtime, Marcus opened his violin case and carefully removed the instrument. Its smooth surface gleamed under the dim backstage lights, reminding him of all the hours he'd spent practicing. He ran his fingers lightly over the strings, plucking each one to check the tuning. Everything sounded perfect. Still, doubt lingered in the back of his mind. What if something went wrong? What if the audience laughed at him instead of applauding? These fears gnawed at him, threatening to overwhelm his confidence. Just then, Mr. Peterson appeared beside him, offering an encouraging smile. "You've worked so hard for this, Marcus," the teacher said warmly. "Don't forget why you started." His words struck a chord deep within Marcus. Yes, he had started playing the violin because someone had underestimated him, but he had continued because he loved the challenge. Music wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about discovering something new within himself. With renewed determination, Marcus nodded silently, gripping the violin a little tighter. Finally, it was time. The MC introduced the first act, and the curtain rose to reveal a group of fifth graders performing a choreographed dance routine. Cheers erupted from the audience as the children twirled and leaped across the stage. One by one, the acts followed, singers belting out pop songs, comedians delivering punchlines, and even a young boy juggling oranges. Each performance drew enthusiastic applause, raising the bar higher for those yet to come. Then came Marcus's turn. The MC announced his name, and the auditorium fell eerily silent. All eyes turned toward the stage as Marcus stepped into the spotlight. For a moment he froze, overwhelmed by the sea of faces staring back at him. Parents sat in the front rows, some leaning forward curiously, while teachers occupied the middle section, their expressions unreadable. In the back, his classmates sat huddled together, whispering amongst themselves. Marcus could feel his palms growing clammy, but he forced himself to take another step forward. He raised the violin to his chin, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. The bow hovered above the strings for what felt like an eternity before, finally touching down. The first note rang out, soft and tentative, but clear enough to silence any lingering chatter in the room. It was Vivaldi's Spring, a piece Marcus had chosen not only for its beauty but also for its symbolism. To him, spring represented growth, renewal, and the triumph of perseverance over adversity. As he played, the melody grew stronger, weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. At first, Marcus focused solely on the music, letting instinct guide his fingers and bow. But as the piece progressed, he became aware of something extraordinary happening around him. The audience was no longer merely watching, they were listening. Heads tilted slightly, eyes widened, and mouths hung open in awe. Even Mrs. Harper, seated near the center of the auditorium, leaned forward unconsciously, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. Marcus's initial nervousness melted away, replaced by a sense of pure joy. This was what he had been working toward, not applause or recognition, but the ability to connect with others through his music. By the time he reached the crescendo, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The final notes soared high and bright, lingering in the air like a promise fulfilled. When the sound faded, there was a brief pause, a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted into thunderous applause. People clapped wildly, whistling, and cheering as though they couldn't contain their excitement. Marcus lowered the violin, his chest heaving with emotion. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision as he looked out at the crowd. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined such a reaction. Among the cheering voices, one stood out clearly. "That was incredible," shouted a boy from his class, pumping his fist in the air. Others quickly joined in, shouting praises like, "Amazing job," and "Way to go, Marcus." Even Mrs. Harper, who had once dismissed him so casually, stood up to applaud, her face flushed with regret and admiration. Marcus bowed deeply, overwhelmed by gratitude. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to earn respect, not through words or gestures, but through action. After the show ended, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Classmates who had once teased him now approached sheepishly, congratulating him on his performance. "I didn't know you could play like that," one boy admitted, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. Another added, "Seriously, man, that was awesome." Teachers shook his hand, praising his dedication and skill. Even Mr. Collins, who had been part of the original prank, offered a heartfelt apology. "We never should have doubted you," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "You proved us all wrong." But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Harper pulled Marcus aside. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, I owe you an apology," she began, tears glistening in her eyes. "What we did, it was wrong. We thought it was funny, but it wasn't fair to you. You've shown incredible strength and talent, and I'm so sorry for underestimating you." Marcus listened quietly, his heart swelling with forgiveness. Though her actions had hurt him deeply, he realized that holding on to anger wouldn't change the past. Instead, he smiled softly and replied, "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." As the evening wore on, Marcus reflected on everything that had led him to this point. The teasing, the long hours of practice, the moments of frustration, all of it had shaped him into the person standing here today. He thought about the teachers who had doubted him, the classmates who had mocked him, and the family who had supported him unconditionally. Most importantly, he thought about the violin itself, the instrument that had once symbolized ridicule, but now represented triumph. Walking home that night, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The weight of judgment and expectation no longer rested on his shoulders. Instead, he carried a newfound sense of purpose. Music had given him a voice when others had tried to silence him, and he vowed never to let anyone take that away again. Little did he know, his journey was far from over. The talent show had opened doors he hadn't even known existed, paving the way for opportunities he could scarcely imagine. But for now, Marcus was content to savor the victory, one beautiful note at a time. The days following the talent show were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Overnight, he went from being the quiet boy who carried a violin to someone people couldn't stop talking about. The buzz in the hallways was electric, with students recounting his performance and marveling at how far he had come. "Did you see Marcus play?" One girl gushed during lunch, her eyes wide with admiration. "I didn't think he could do it, but wow, he blew everyone away." Others nodded in agreement, their earlier teasing replaced by genuine respect. For Marcus, this newfound attention was both thrilling and overwhelming. Teachers, too, were quick to acknowledge the change. Mrs. Harper, still carrying the weight of her guilt, made a point to visit Marcus's classroom more often. She would linger near his desk during lessons, offering words of encouragement or asking thoughtful questions about his music. "You've inspired us all," she told him one afternoon, her voice tinged with sincerity. Though Marcus appreciated her efforts, he remained cautious. He knew apologies couldn't erase the past, but he also understood that people could grow, and Mrs. Harper seemed genuinely eager to make amends. Meanwhile, Mr. Peterson took Marcus under his wing, inviting him to join the school orchestra. At first, Marcus hesitated. Joining meant committing even more time to practicing, and he worried about balancing music with his studies. But when Mr. Peterson handed him sheet music for a Mozart concerto, something inside Marcus lit up. The intricate notes danced across the page like a challenge waiting to be conquered. "This is your chance to keep growing," Mr. Peterson urged. "Don't let the momentum stop here." With a deep breath, Marcus agreed, realizing that music wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was part of who he was. Being part of the orchestra introduced Marcus to a whole new world. Rehearsals were held twice a week after school, filling the music room with harmonious melodies as violins, cellos, flutes, and trumpets blended together. At first, Marcus struggled to keep up. Playing solo pieces was one thing, Coordinating with an ensemble required precision and teamwork. Notes clashed occasionally and tempos wavered as the group adjusted to each other's rhythms. Yet, despite the challenges, Marcus thrived in this environment. There was something magical about creating music alongside others, about contributing to something greater than himself. His fellow orchestra members noticed his dedication almost immediately. One day, during a break between rehearsals, a girl named Lily approached him. She played the cello and had always been one of the top musicians in the group. "You're really good," she said simply, leaning against the piano bench. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. "Thanks," he replied shyly. "I'm still learning." Lily smiled knowingly. "We're all still learning. But you've got something special. Don't lose it." Encouraged by these interactions, Marcus threw himself into his practice routine with renewed vigor. Afternoons became sacred blocks of time dedicated to perfecting his technique. He experimented with different bowing styles, practiced vibrato until his arm ached, and studied recordings of professional violinists to refine his tone. Each improvement, no matter how small, fueled his passion further. By winter, Marcus had transformed not only as a musician but also as a person. Confidence radiated from him now, replacing the quiet uncertainty that had once defined him. At home, Marcus's parents watched their son's transformation with pride. His mother often found herself pausing outside his bedroom door, listening, as he played complex pieces with ease. "He's come so far," she whispered to his father one evening, tears brimming in her eyes. His dad nodded, his chest swelling with emotion. "And he's not done yet," he added. "This is just the beginning." But Marcus's journey wasn't without its obstacles. As his reputation grew, so did expectations. Some classmates began pressuring him to perform at every opportunity, whether it was a birthday party or a family gathering. "Come on, Marcus, just one song," they'd plead, clapping their hands enthusiastically. While he enjoyed sharing his music, the constant requests sometimes left him feeling drained. He worried about burning out, about losing the joy that had driven him to pick up the violin in the first place. To cope, Marcus set boundaries. He politely declined invitations that felt overwhelming and carved out time for himself away from the spotlight. On weekends, he returned to his favorite spot beneath the big oak tree, sketching pictures of instruments in his notebook. These quiet moments reminded him why he loved music, not because it earned him applause, but because it gave him peace. As spring approached, another opportunity arose, a regional youth music competition. Mr. Peterson encouraged Marcus to enter, assuring him that he was ready. "This is your chance to shine on a bigger stage," the teacher said, placing a flyer on Marcus's desk. The prospect terrified him. Competing against older, more experienced musicians felt daunting, especially since many of them had been playing their instruments for years. Yet, deep down, Marcus knew he couldn't pass up the chance to test his skills. If nothing else, it would be another step forward in his journey. Preparing for the competition consumed every waking moment. Marcus practiced late into the night, his fingers moving deftly over the strings as he memorized difficult passages. He visualized himself on stage, imagining the judges' reactions and the audience's applause. Doubts crept in occasionally. What if he choked? What if he disappointed everyone who believed in him? But he pushed them aside, focusing instead on the progress he had already made. On the day of the competition, nerves threatened to overwhelm him. The venue was larger than anything he had performed in before, with rows of chairs stretching toward the back of the auditorium. Parents, teachers, and fellow competitors milled about, chatting excitedly. Marcus sat in a corner, tuning his violin and running through mental checklists. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage, heart pounding like a drum. The piece he chose was challenging, a fiery allegro movement from a Bach sonata. But Marcus attacked it with confidence. Each note soared through the air, crisp and precise, earning murmurs of approval from the audience. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Though he didn't win first place, The judges awarded him second prize, praising his technical skill and emotional depth. As he accepted the trophy, Marcus felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the recognition but for the journey that had brought him here. Back at school, news of Marcus's success spread quickly. Classmates cheered when he returned, hoisting him onto their shoulders in celebration. Teachers beamed with pride, calling him a role model for perseverance and hard work. Even those who had once doubted him now spoke of him with admiration. "Marcus has taught us all a lesson," Mrs. Harper said during a faculty meeting, her voice steady with conviction. "Never underestimate someone's potential." In the months that followed, Marcus continued to grow as a musician and as a person. He joined advanced classes, performed at community events, and even began teaching younger students how to play the violin. Watching their faces light up as they mastered their first notes reminded him of his own journey. The struggles, the triumphs, and the unwavering belief that had carried him through. Looking back, Marcus realized that the prank had been a blessing in disguise. It had forced him to confront adversity head-on, transforming him into someone stronger and more resilient. Music had become his anchor, grounding him during tough times and lifting him higher than he ever thought possible. And while he knew there would be challenges ahead, he faced them with courage, knowing that he had already proven what he was capable of achieving. For Marcus Thompson, life was no longer about proving others wrong. It was about embracing his passion, inspiring those around him, and continuing to chase dreams that once seemed impossible. Every time he picked up his violin, he reminded himself of where he had started and how far he had come. As the years passed, Marcus Thompson's life took on a rhythm that mirrored the melodies he so loved to play. What had started as a cruel prank in elementary school evolved into a lifelong journey of self-discovery and growth. The boy who once struggled to produce a single clear note on the violin now stood on stages far beyond the confines of Maplewood Elementary, captivating audiences with his music. Each performance was a testament not only to his talent, but also to the resilience that had carried him through every challenge. By high school, Marcus had become something of a local legend. His name appeared regularly in the town newspaper, accompanied by glowing reviews of his concerts and recitals. Teachers spoke of him with pride, recalling how he had transformed adversity into triumph. Even Mrs. Harper, who had played a role in the original prank, often attended his performances, sitting quietly in the back row with tears glistening in her eyes. She would later confess to friends that witnessing Marcus's success felt like redemption, not just for him, but for herself as well. Marcus's achievements weren't limited to local recognition. In his junior year, he earned a scholarship to attend a prestigious summer music program in New York City. For the first time in his life, he left the familiar streets of his hometown and stepped into a world bustling with diversity and opportunity. The city was overwhelming at first. Its towering skyscrapers, endless noise, and fast-paced energy made him feel small and insignificant. But as soon as he entered the practice rooms of the conservatory, surrounded by other passionate musicians, Marcus felt right at home. The program pushed him to new heights. He studied under renowned instructors who challenged him to think differently about music. "It's not just about playing the notes," one teacher told him during a private lesson. "It's about telling a story, sharing an emotion. Let the music speak for you." These words resonated deeply with Marcus, reminding him of why he had fallen in love with the violin in the first place. Music wasn't just technical skill, it was a language, a way to connect with others on a level words alone couldn't reach. During breaks between classes, Marcus explored the city, marveling at its museums, parks, and street performers. One afternoon, while wandering through Central Park, he stumbled upon a group of musicians gathered around a fountain. They were playing everything from jazz standards to classical masterpieces, their instruments blending seamlessly despite their differences. Inspired, Marcus joined them, pulling out his violin and launching into a lively rendition of a Vivaldi piece. Passers-by stopped to listen, tossing coins into an open guitar case as applause rippled through the crowd. It was a spontaneous moment, unplanned yet profoundly meaningful, a reminder that music could bridge gaps and bring people together, no matter where they came from. When the summer program ended, Marcus returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. He began mentoring younger students, teaching them not only how to hold a bow or read sheet music, but also how to find joy in the process. Many of these children reminded him of himself, shy, uncertain, and eager to prove themselves. "Don't worry about making mistakes," he'd tell them gently. "Every wrong note is just a step closer to getting it right." Seeing their faces light up as they mastered a difficult passage filled him with a sense of fulfillment that surpassed any award or accolade. College brought even greater opportunities. Marcus attended a top-tier music school on a full scholarship, immersing himself in a rigorous curriculum designed to hone his craft. Here, he encountered peers who shared his passion and drive, forming friendships that would last a lifetime. Together, they formed a chamber ensemble that performed across the country, earning critical acclaim for their innovative interpretations of classic works. Marcus discovered that collaboration amplified his creativity, allowing him to explore new dimensions of expression. Despite his success, Marcus never forgot his roots. During holidays, he returned to his hometown, performing benefit concerts to raise funds for local schools and community programs. These events became annual traditions, drawing large crowds eager to support both Marcus and the causes he championed. One year, he donated proceeds from a concert to purchase new instruments for Maplewood Elementary, ensuring that future generations would have access to the same opportunities he had been given. Years later, when Marcus graduated from college and embarked on a professional career, he chose to balance performance with education. While touring internationally as a soloist, he also worked part-time as a music teacher, dedicating himself to nurturing young talent. His classrooms buzzed with energy, filled with students who looked up to him not just as a musician, but as a mentor and role model. "You've shown us that anything is possible," one student wrote in a thank you card, her words echoing sentiments shared by many. Throughout his journey, Marcus remained grounded by the lessons he had learned along the way. He understood that success wasn't measured by trophies or standing ovations, but by the impact he had on others. Whether it was inspiring a shy child to pick up an instrument or reminding a former teacher of the power of forgiveness, Marcus's influence extended far beyond the stage. On a crisp autumn evening, decades after his first tentative steps with the violin, Marcus found himself back at Maplewood Elementary. The school had invited him to deliver a keynote speech during its annual arts festival. Standing before a packed auditorium of students, parents, and teachers, Marcus reflected on his unlikely path. "When I was your age," he began, his voice steady and warm, "someone handed me a violin as a joke. They thought I wouldn't last a week. But here I am today, living proof that determination can turn even the toughest challenges into opportunities." He paused, scanning the sea of faces before him. Some students sat wide-eyed, hanging onto his every word. Others fidgeted nervously, unsure of what to expect. Marcus smiled, remembering how he had once been in their shoes. "Life will throw obstacles your way," he continued. "People may doubt you, laugh at you, or try to hold you back. But none of that matters if you believe in yourself. Find what makes you happy, work hard at it, and don't let anyone take that away from you." As he concluded his speech, Marcus picked up his violin and played a piece he had written specifically for the occasion. It was a hauntingly beautiful melody, weaving together themes of struggle, hope, and triumph. When the final note faded, the audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in admiration. Among them were his parents, now older but still proud, and several of his former teachers, including Mrs. Harper, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. After the event, Marcus lingered near the entrance, greeting well-wishers and signing autographs. A young boy approached him hesitantly, clutching a battered violin case. "Can I show you something?" he asked timidly. Without waiting for a response, he opened the case and began playing a simple tune. The notes wavered slightly, but the effort was undeniable. Marcus listened intently, nodding encouragingly. When the boy finished, he looked up anxiously. "Was that okay?" Marcus knelt down to meet his gaze, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That was wonderful," he said sincerely. "Keep practicing and don't give up. You'll be amazed at what you can achieve." The boy beamed, gratitude shining in his eyes, and Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was why he did what he did, not for fame or fortune, but to inspire others to chase their dreams. As Marcus walked away from the school that night, the cool breeze rustling the leaves overhead, he felt a profound sense of contentment. His journey had been long and challenging, marked by moments of doubt and triumph alike. But through it all, he had stayed true to himself, using music as a bridge to connect with others and leave a lasting legacy. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly hold new challenges, Marcus faced it with confidence, knowing that he had already proven what was possible when passion met perseverance. For Marcus Thompson, the violin wasn't just an instrument. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to extraordinary destinations. And as he disappeared into the night, the faint strains of a melody drifted behind him, carried on the wind like a promise. The story was far from over.